We're going to talk about antitrust policy today. Antitrust policy is a public policy to promote competition. Monopolies fail to allocate resources efficiently. Monopolies do not allocate resources efficiently. Not everybody who's willing to pay for the good is able to get it. They produce less than the socially desirable quantity of output, enabling them to charge prices above marginal cost. That's why they fail to allocate resources efficiently. Everybody have it? Nope. How about now? Everybody have it? All right. The government can respond in 4 ways to this the monopoly inefficiency. They can try to make monopolized industries more competitive. They can regulate the behavior of monopolies through antitrust policies. They can turn some private monopolies into public enterprises. And they can do nothing at all. Who's still writing? All right. Antitrust policy. They passed antitrust laws back in the late 1800s. Was the first one when it's a collection of statutes aimed at curbing monopoly power. It's early 1900s, late 1800s. Anybody know what the first antitrust law was called? Anybody know what it's called? You probably studied it in U.S. history. Yeah, Sherman. You think it was second? I thought it was the first. Anyway, it's one of the first. Okay, Sherman antitrust was the first big one. Okay, what were the industries at the time that they were trying to Break up the monopoly. They had steel, railroads, oil. Right. Those are the big things they were trying to break up. A current example would be the merging of Pepsi and Coke. The Justice Department wouldn't allow it. Okay? Because, most soft drinks, either Pepsi or Coke, if you went to a restaurant, they could charge you $5 for a glass of Sprite or 7-Up or whatever you got. That was because no one else competes with it. So they wouldn't. That's an example of a merger they would not allow. In 1994, the government prevented Microsoft from buying Intuit. I think we talked about this one before. Microsoft produces software. Intuit is the processors, the computers themselves. If Microsoft was able to buy Intuit, then they could control, every computer. Basically, 80%, probably 80% of computers use Windows software. They could put it only on that computer and limit it to that, so everybody'd have to buy Intuit computers. They control the industry. So then we go back to the Sherman Antitrust Act. In 1890 was when the Sherman Antitrust Act took place. It was the first antitrust law passed to reduce the market power of large and powerful trusts. Another early antitrust law was the Clayton Act of 1914. It strengthened government powers and authorized private lawsuits. The Clayton Act is another one. I got them? All right. How do antitrust laws promote competition? They allow the government to prevent mergers that would create powerful companies, like we said, Coke and Pepsi. Secondly, they allow the government to break up companies, like in 1984. AT&T was split into 8 companies. This happened. I remember this. I was a kid when this happened. I remember it was a big deal. Everybody was Bell Telephone. It was called AT&T. It's AT&T, but everybody called it Bell Telephone. And they were charging. They charged like my grandmother lived in Shelbyville. To call my grandmother in Shelbyville, it cost like $2 a minute. I mean, they charged really high prices to make long distance phone calls, and because there's no competition. And then people got fed up with it. The government broke it up, and there's 7 or 8 different companies now that or the telephone, and you can make a long distance call now for there's no extra charge, right? With most phone plans, so it accomplished what it needed to. Number 3. Prevent companies from coordinated activities that make markets less competitive. All right, so that a lot of times you'll read in the newspaper once in a while they'll talk about fixing concrete prices or something like a builder makes a deal with a concrete supplier, and it's unfair. And that somehow, that concrete supplier is the only one that can supply for these big sky rises with all the concrete. They work out some type of thing where they're working together to benefit themselves, but it's not fair to the market, right? price fixing type of things and those type of things. So they prevent that type of coordinating activity. All right, everybody have it? Moving on. Synergies. Synergy is a desirable merger to reduce costs. The most common example right now that's happened in the last 10 years or so is banks. There used to be all kinds of little banks. You know, AFNB, People's, Indiana National Bank, Bank One, all these different banks, and it was nice for the customer relations because you could establish a relationship with your local banker, but as the bigger banks started buying these banks up, and then actually they merged their services and they became more efficient, and actually banking is less expensive now because of these mergers that have came. Now we have the big banks, Chase, Fifth Third, Citibank, these really big banks. They're almost getting too big. Now they're talking about breaking them up some again from the the customer service side of the banking and the investment banking where these banks invest. They want to break that up. But as far from the customer service side, the mergers made banks more efficient, less expensive to bank there. So that was a desirable merger. You also have probably heard of what other sector is synonymous with synergies. In fact, one of the companies in this sector is called Synergy. Anybody know what other sector uses synergies a lot? Okay, energy suppliers are often synergies. Regulation is common in the case of natural monopolies such as water and electric companies. All right? The water company can't just decide we're going to charge people more for their water. They have to go through a regulatory commission who votes on it, and they decide if they will allow water price increases, electrical price increases, same thing. The post office is not a federal organization. It is a separate entity from the government. Okay? But the government overregulates the post office. They determine, Congress votes on it whether they can raise the price of a stamp. And it's really hurt the post office. The post office has been making losses year after year. Eventually it's going to go bankrupt because Congress, the post office says, we need to do away with Saturday delivery. We can't afford to do Saturday delivery. But Congress won't let them stop. They want to look out for their constituents. Okay? It's not right. They don't let the post office make decisions that will make them make a profit. You might have heard recently, just in the last week, they reduced the price of stamps 2 cents because it's no longer a recession. The government's dictating that. So it is a independent company from the government, but it's regulated by the government. And just like I was talking, the government regulates prices they can charge. So what happens when they regulate the prices they can charge? Okay, then they will make them set the price at equal to, like a natural monopoly, they'll make the price equal to marginal cost. So there's no markup. Remember when we talked about competitive monopolies or monopolistic competition? We talked about markups, right? When the price is above the marginal cost, they don't allow the markup. They make them charge at price equals marginal cost. But when this happens, this will maximize surplus and create efficient allocation. But there's problems with it. Let you get that written down, and then we'll talk about the next slide. All right. The problems with marginal cost pricing are marginal cost is usually less than average total cost. So if they're charging with price equals marginal cost, these companies, these natural monopolies will be making a loss. You can look at the graph of natural monopoly and locate marginal cost and average total cost, and you can see on there that it's going to cause them to charge at a price less than average total cost. And we know that that's going to be making losses, right? So they would lose money if they have to charge marginal costs. And then the firms would leave the industry if they were in this condition. All right, so to prevent the exit, the government would subsidize monopolists for their losses. And then when they do this, when they subsidize, they have to raise money to subsidize, so they have to tax, which creates deadweight loss. So it's a vicious cycle. I mean, the government wants to stop prices from being too high, but when they do so, that hurts the companies they regulate, and then in order to pay for the regulation, to be fair to these companies that they're dictating what they can charge, they have to raise taxes so that they can, make economic profit, normal profit. And that creates deadweight loss. We know that. When you tax, you create deadweight loss. Another thing they can do is average cost pricing, right? They can, rather than dictate they charge marginal cost, they can say you are going to charge your average cost. And then they're making zero economic profit. Okay, so average cost pricing is another option. Now, there are problems with average cost pricing as well. Okay? It also causes deadweight loss, and the higher cost is like a tax on the consumers. And also with this is if the government subsidizes or says that you can charge an average cost, then there's no incentives for firms to reduce their costs, right? If they're being subsidized to charge a certain price, or they automatically say you can charge average cost, then the firms aren't going to try to reduce their costs, right? They'll just keep their costs where they are and make the economic profit. So there's no incentive for them to reduce their costs with these remedies. Any questions? All right. That's it. Okay.